set, record. Okay. And Ursula.
Good morning, all. I am the OLLI liaison for science and technology, and I am here this morning. I am apologetic that I haven't been able to join you for other classes, but I have been in other meetings at the same time this whole time, so I haven't been able to come. But I wanted to attend this morning to say thank you, particularly to Charlie for all the work that he's done and for his willingness to bring his expertise to OLLI and share with all of you all of that information that's so timely and important at this point in our history. So I'm really grateful, and the members of the OLLI Curriculum Committee are really grateful to you. Thank you so much for doing all of that. I know there've been a couple of rough moments technology-wise, but you seem to have weathered them all and gotten through it and done a good job. So I appreciate that that's happened. Also, I wanted to remind everyone that because Charles Hall is teaching for us for the first time, you'll get a survey asking you about the class, and he will get that feedback after you have taken that survey. So I ask that everybody make sure to fill that out and send it back in. It'll be reviewed by the OLLI Curriculum Committee, but it will also go to Charlie so that he can see how things went for himself and where we're going for that. And the third thing I'm supposed to remember to say is, and I know Anne has done this before, and maybe some of the rest of you, that we're always looking for instructors for OLLI. And that includes you, Paul. You may be a long way away, but we are able to do these things by distance, as you can see. And we are always looking for people who have a specific interest or expertise that they want to share. And we just happen to be having the fall proposal call going on right now until May 31st. We'll be reviewing those in a variety of areas, and I assume most of you know all of what OLLI offers generally. So keep in mind, if you have a special area of expertise, we'd love to have a proposal from you and help out with getting something up and going. So again, thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you, Paul, for helping out there and being his co-faculty member. And let's just get started with class. I'm excited to hear about it.
Oh, let me just
thank you.
Let me just interject that, you don't have to just teach a class. You can also facilitate a class. Right. So if you feel uncertain of your own depth of information in an area, you can, I did one on the manufacturers of the Rogue Valley. I was the facilitator. I didn't have to talk about any of these companies. So, that's the kind of thing
that's great for you to remember and bring up. Thank you for doing that. Yes.
And Ursula and Anne, if you see somebody else with the name of Hall and her first name is Murda, she's become some kind of administrator in OLLI and in charge of, I don't know, events or something. And if you see her, she's, well, we're a bit older, but she's very blonde. And if you recognize her, that's my wife.
Oh, and
good. Or a white dog with black spots. It's not a Dalmatian, that's us. Hello. And
sorry, guys.
Okay, and all right, are we ready to go? So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to do a review. And let me see if I've got the right one here. I think I do. Yes. And this will be, I hope, a 15-minute review of the entire course, and I'm going to go very fast. So this is the 8th lecture, review and discussion. And especially I want to think about peak oil energy return on investment and limits to growth and what that means for our current economic situation. Okay, the first lecture we had, the idea was to understand the importance of energy in the earth around us, how general it was, how it wasn't just in the physics lab, how it was everywhere. That every time I do the dishes, I think about energy, the energy of hot water versus cold, the energy of my scrubbing, the energy of the detergent, and how that works and so forth. So unfortunately, energy is usually taught in as some entity in physics, or in ecology, only one chapter out of 18 in the book. But in fact, it's pervasive in natural selection. It's pervasive in our activity as organisms and so forth. And that in the past, people didn't understand energy at all, but they were, except in a certain way, they did. And many of the old gods were about energy. Prometheus bringing energy to humans and so forth and so on. And the origin of our understanding, our modern understanding of energy, started with this guy, Sadi Carnot, a French military engineer, and who understood that it wasn't just heat that was important, but a gradient in heat to do work. And then James Prescott Joule, who understood the importance of the way and that you could measure very carefully the thermal equivalent of physical work. He'd drop a weight over a pulley, and this paddle wheel would turn in water and the temperature would rise. And so he could get what he called mechanical equivalent of heat, but I think the heat equivalent of mechanical. And then Thomson, Clausius, Helmholtz, and Kelvin put it all together, Thomson maybe especially, this guy, and came up with the laws of thermodynamics, which were so critical to understanding energy. The first law of thermodynamics is the quantity of energy is conserved. Now remember, this is only because we can measure all energy in terms of its heat. So when you're begin and you end, the heat is conserved. But the second law says the quality of energy is not conserved. At each transformation, some energy is lost to low gradient heat. And we go back to Carnot, and it's heat that doesn't have enough of a gradient to do work. It's heat that's just 1 degree above its surroundings, and you can't do any work with that. And that's the important thing. And what that means is sooner or later, the universe is going to run out of energy, supposedly. That's going to take a long, long time. And in a much shorter time, our special energy reserves will be gone. Okay, second presentation focused on the early life and Earth environment, the particular role of the sun, evolution of life, and the most important things that happen. So here's the sun, and here's I should put it on the display. Excuse me for a second. What's happening here? Here. So here's the sun. Here's the sun running the Earth thermal machine. And from our perspective, there's solar input, which is we call free energy. It's available energy. And it goes to unavailable energy, that's low temperature gradient energy. And life and Earth and whatever is just a little paddle wheel stuck in that flow of energy. It captures energy over time and then uses it to run the machinery of the Earth and the machinery of life.
Hey,
Quite amazing.
Charlie, I'm going to interrupt for a second.
Yeah,
I think you're going to want to put it on presenter view because we're seeing the information on your next slide. And I think for the purposes of your recording, you wanted to have it be just full screen for people.
What do I do now? I thought I was.
Presenter view. Oh.
Where do I find that?
In your controls for PowerPoint, under play, slideshow. I think it's under slideshow.
Oh, I can't hear you. You don't have your thing on.
Oh,
What do I click on, Ann?
Okay, down at the bottom, all
Yeah,
the way to the right before you get to the slider, there's a,
yeah, I thought I did that.
okay.
Let's try again. Now there's I don't know. How about now?
Yeah.
Uh,
Ann, is it okay?
well, it's okay. I'll just fix it in the video editing. So go ahead.
Okay. I mean, can you see blue-green algae?
Yeah.
Ann?
Yes, it just we also see your next slide. It's okay. I'll fix it.
Okay. So this magic that green plants figured out to take water and CO2. Now, the important thing from our perspective is there's no energy in water. You can't burn it. It's burned in a way. It's hydrogen that's already oxidized. The electron is at rest. And same with 6 CO2. But the magic that plants figured out is to rip the water and the CO2 apart and recombine them as sugar, C6H12O6, which is usable energy, and this waste product, oxygen. And this oxygen turned the atmosphere into an oxygenated environment, which you can see in these rocks from Glacier National Park. They're the same materials, the gray, green below and the red above, but but in the interim, at that margin, the atmosphere turned to oxygen and the iron in these rocks rusted and turned red. That's just rust. And the whole earth went from an anaerobic environment to an oxygenated one, which at first was very, very toxic for life. And then life learned to exploit through mitochondria, and all of this amazing evolution took place. And periodically, the clock was reset with a big meteor striking in southern Mexico, for example, and wiping out the dinosaurs except for the birds, and opening up opportunities for for these guys, for humans. And so here's Raymond Lindemann and Howard Odom. This was the end of that lecture. Figured out how to measure this energy flow in nature. Here's a picture of yours truly with a bunch of students out in the stream, and we do this every fall. We do a study of the flow of energy through one of these lovely little streams in upstate New York, and with the whole teams figuring out how to measure energy flow through an ecosystem. And then we learn how to make models of it. Third lecture, evolution of mammals, proto-hominoids, that means early humans, and our own species, and the increased exploitation of energy by humans and evolution of agriculture. All of this is about the evolution, which means gradual change, both natural selection and genetic evolution, and also cultural evolution of our species being able to exploit more and more of nature, as figured out basically by Charles Darwin. For example, the evolution of our skull went from a flattening of the face as we became eating more plants, mostly over time, and as you can see, an enormous increase in the size of our brain. Why? There was natural selection for being able to think. For whatever reason, it seemed it led to these guys having more surviving children till we have, good Lord, 8 billion of them. And it's all about energy, from spear points and fire to whatever it is that we're doing. And here are some of how our ancestors lived. These are modern people, but representing hunter-gatherers. and still doing quite well in Africa. Some of them following their ancestors' lifestyle. Very, very interesting to me. Okay, humans then came out of Africa. We found just in the last week that humans in Europe and many of our ancestors are more closely related to East Africans than East Africans are to West Africans or East Africans are to South Africans. Just in the last week, we seem to have discovered this. And humans, of course, went all the way down through the Americas and had a marvelous time with lots of stupid animals that they could easily spare for thousands of years. Then something came on that really changed the energy picture for man, and that's for humans, is the evolution of agriculture, which we think of as taking place in the Middle East, basically, but actually place kind of simultaneously in these different green areas on this map, different parts of the world. I don't know why they kind of happened all at the same time, but that seems to be what happened. Okay, in humans, we think of genetic engineering as new, but this is what happened during the last 10,000 years, that people in Mexico, I guess you'd call them Native Americans, took this little plant on the left and kept what was the most productive of them over time until we got what we have on the right, modern day corn. Before we had any understood genetics, they just kept the biggest plants and bred them and then kept the biggest of their children. And here we have corn today. Okay, lecture 4, Industrial Revolution. Here's an early James Watt steam engine with a big chamber over there. And the critical thing that James Watt had was that he would inject steam. He could have a port on either end with the steam going in during the upstroke and steam going out during the downstroke, and the converse on the other end. So this made a tremendous difference in the world and led to all kinds of intensive manufacturing. And somebody in the class was really scared about those dresses and gears, and with good reason. People got really hurt until people understood to cover up those straps, for example, with covers, steel covers. My hero in much of this is William Stanley Jevons, who came up with Jevons paradox. As you make things more efficient, we use more of the resource, and wrote about the coal question, that England was going to run out of coal within 200 years, which indeed has pretty much happened. 5th lecture on peak oil, energy return on investment, limits to growth. And I asked whether this fellow, M. King Hubbard, might be, whom I knew pretty well, incidentally, at one time, who was came up with the idea of a Hubbard curve, that the use of a resource over time would increase exponentially, reach a peak at roughly half of the use of the resource, and then would decrease on the other side. This is a Hubbard curve, his first one that he did. He was a little bit underestimating conventional oil, and also he had no idea about unconventional oil, what we call fracking, which is adding, and Alaska, which he said, I think there might be oil up there, but I don't know, which has added a shoulder on this, but we're now declining on the far side. Let's see, we're now at 2020. So we've made it, it's been kind of flat till now, and now it does seem to be decreasing, but people can argue. Okay, in my own work with Jean Larrière and Roger, having a senior moment here, and Roger says that the official estimates of oil reserves, which are the brown line, are increasing, but they do it incorrectly. I should make this paper available on the site that we have, and the actual reserves that we had are declining rapidly. And we're actually in deep doo-doo with respect to oil, and people have no clue. These are three estimates that were made by Stephen Moore et al. And other people have done studies like this of all of our fossil fuels. And the blue is coal, and red is various kinds of oil, and the green is gas. And this is a low estimate, which I believe is closest to being correct, but I'm not sure. This is a median estimate that still has a peak before 2050, well before 2050, and a high estimate of fossil fuels for which I see no evidence, but that has a peak around 2050. So people who are alive today, no matter which of these estimates is correct, we'll take the median one, are going to have to deal with a constricting energy supply of all energy, not just oil, but especially oil. Gas will be a little bit longer, and then we'll see. This idea of the limits to growth, that's associated especially with Donella and Dennis Meadows, and was really the brainchild of Jay Forrester, was published 50 years ago and is pretty much right on in its predictions. And people don't understand it. This is basically a good representative of what we know today, what we can measure today. And while everybody is all worried about CO2 and climate change and everything, I and some few others are more worried about depletion as something that will impact human culture. And it's especially scary because we don't understand the political and social implications of this. For example, and this is just looking at what we do. This was a study that we published in 2009, and we have the economy here, which takes energy out of the ground, out of the world, and pumps it into the economy. And the question is, to get this energy to run our society, how much energy, the top dark blue line, do we have to invest into getting it? Now, we also have to invest into infrastructure maintenance, and then we have discretionary investment. Let's build a new movie theater, a new building, or a new whatever, and a new road. And so all of our GDP goes either into investments or consumptions. And we have staples, food, shelter, clothing, what we have to do, and discretionary. This is what it looked like in 2007. And projecting, this was our projections at the time, in that we would have to put more and more energy into getting the energy as the energy return on investment declined. To get the same input to the economy, this appears to be true, which will require more energy here and squeeze out discretionary spending for both consumption and investment. People will see that as inflation, and that makes it politically unstable. Going to 2050, if EORI continues to decline, then it's not looking like a very wealthy future, because we have to put so much of our economic activity in just to getting the energy to run it. Okay, lecture 6 was conventional economists, and we talked about mercantilists, physiocrats, classical and neoclassical economists. And I note all were focused on the main economic energies of their time. Mercantilists, wind. The wind that moved sailing ships was critical to them. Physiocrats focused on land. Land was valuable. The English gentry had land. They were the wealthy ones because it intercepted the sunlight that ran the forests and the agriculture. and the grazing lands of the time. That's what was the main energy input to the economists of the time. Classical economists focused on labor because the actual activities of human muscles was what was the main operation in as we invented manufacturing centers. And neoclassical economists focused on capital. And you might say, well, capital isn't energy, but capital is the means by which fossil energy was used. It's very important to understand that what is considered and taught as economics today is only one of a variety of ways that even economists thought about economics. It's almost an accident we think about economics as we do. All right, the most important economist, Malthus, who said the population, blue, would grow faster than the resources. Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, very, very famous. People think he was in support of business, and they use his one quote about how free enterprise makes it's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker that we have our dinner, but from their own self-interest that provides the best situation for all of society. Adam Smith said many things. That was only one of the things that he said. Karl Marx, widely misunderstood. The birth of neoclassical economics by solving the diamond versus water paradox, and including Stanley Jevons, by the way. But that began the marginal revolution in the near abandonment of classical economics. And the idea was marginal utility. This was the critical thing. The first liter of water was worth everything you had, and the 100th liter much less, and the 1000th liter ho hum. Okay, and let's not forget John Maynard Keynes, who talked a lot about how government intervention could smooth out the bumps in capitalist economy, and in fact, it did. Not until 1973. Lecture 7, the last week, why we need biophysical economics, and that conventional economics doesn't really understand this basic two pictures. This is a 33 horsepower harvester. Good one, I guess. And they're the 30, well, they're actually mules, but 33 horsepower, and you got 5 people running it, plus the stable boys, and you got to get the forage for the mules and so forth and so on. And this is what oil has meant, or fossil fuels, but oil in particular. Here's a 200 horsepower, 7 times bigger, controlled by one person. And of course, whoever built the harvester and pulled the oil out of the ground, et cetera. I mean, those things you'd have to do a little more complicated analysis. But this is why economics work. Whatever Tarkanini idea you have about what economics is, if you pull out more oil out of the ground, you can make it work. And that's what we've done. And I say we need to focus on the energy, not on the economic ideas. So this basic idea of neoclassical economics, that economics is just a cycling between firms and household, is a main fairy tale about the economy. This breaks the laws of thermodynamics, has no energy input or degradation. It breaks the law of conservation of mass, and it has not been tested in using the scientific method. And we want to replace that with this being the minimum diagram one could have of how an economy works, starting with the energy sources and then the raw materials and the human steps of exploitation, processing, manufacturing, and consumption. That's an economy. There's an antidote to all of the misinformation above. It's called biophysical economics. There are various societies that deal with this. And we have our Introduction to Biophysical Economics by Hall and Klitgard, who is an economist. Questions. Now, I'm going to just ask these main questions because I deal with these every day. The first is, what is the energy cost of anything we do, including the transition to renewables? Second, is there enough copper, nickel, cobalt, lithium, rare earths, neodymium, whatever? And what are the increased energy costs as our reserves are depleted? So we used to mine in Butte, Montana, if you've ever been to Butte, Montana, copper ore that was 40% copper. And when I started studying, it was around 1% copper. And now it's 0.4% copper. And as the grade goes down, and because we use the best stuff first, then the energy cost goes up. Okay, I have Ann Belugia's questions, which I'm going to get out of this thing and get back to where we all are. And I'm not sure. Let's get down to where we are. And I'm going to start because Ann very thoughtfully mailed me a bunch of questions before. And then I will open this to everybody. And Paul, you will sort of manage things. So let's start with Ann's first questions. And maybe somebody will want to ask this about the transition, but here's her first question. What I heard from Ray, and I echo, is what those with the biophysical view of economics think our policy should be to avoid the consequences of ill-conceived economic theory. I'm with you on birth control and educating people, but and the first answer I have is simply keep growing. Don't have an economics based on ever increasing growth of resources. And I mean, okay, once we get there, okay, now I'm running for president on a platform of no growth, and I'm asking you all to vote for me now. I don't think that's going to happen. So what we could do and what we are going to do, I suspect are going to be very, very different. Now, I want to tell you, I get almost daily much more pessimistic views of the future. And I will tell you to look at, I think you can pick it off my site that I have, the Oli site, the thing by Michael, the heck's his name? It's the last one down, I think. And he's actually a man of the cloth. He's an ordained minister. But who thinks about this a whole lot. And he think I'm depressive then. And obviously there are many, many dimensions of the problems. And there was just a degrowth conference in England, in Brussels, that I'm going to put on the site. And I'm going to leave the site there and I'm going to clean it up and improve it over time. So, okay, now, are there any other people who would like to raise their hands right now? Paul, can you see everybody? I'd like to hear from a few more people, and if you don't, well, I'm going to go back to Ann's second question.
Paul,
Paul, turn on your microphone.
I can only see the ones that have their cameras on.
Okay.
Well, people could use the reactions and do the raise hand thing if they want to
Or you
that
can just turn off your microphone and yell. I don't care. Okay, we're going to go to Ann's second question. Another tangent might be about all the stuff, like you and your wife. A move required Terry and me to downsize this past October. Yeah. I mean, how do you talk to a teenage girl about not having more stuff in your life? And I don't mean to say girl or guy, whatever, you know, and not necessarily teenager, but so I don't know what to say. I'll say one thing I think we should do. When I lived in Syracuse, New York, we had a the company was Covanta, and they took all our waste, which was 20% plastic, and burned it cleaner than coal, which was the alternative. And they burned it and produced enough energy for 77,000 homes, enough electricity. And, you know, burying your waste is like burying oil, burying fuel. And so they would put it in this, you know, fairly large structure, and they have a claw, sort of like on you know, when you try to pick up the rabbits, the stuff, the plushy rabbits and stuff in a when you go to an amusement park, and you know, and you got this machine that steals all your money, looks like it's going to go grab things, and they had something like that to move the trash around, and then when it gets dry enough, put it in the burner, and it was a very clean, very efficient way of getting a second use out of all of our packaging. And then there was no plastics left. Well, some went out the smokestack, but all, you know, they had state-of-the-art technology to clean up the smokestack. I thought that was great.
isn't plastic derived from fossil fuel? I mean, the
Sure. So you're
bonds,
burning oil.
yeah.
Why not? In 20% of our waste stream is plastic. You know, all the plastic bags, and then the plastic stuff your food came in, whatever. You know, and I look at that all the time, and geez, it's so convenient and so good for keeping germs off the food and whatever. And then you think, oh my God, I mean, did you see the picture of a turtle with a straw stuck up its nostril? And, you know, this horrible stuff with the plastic skin in the ocean. And so, and even now in streams, in England, they find little particles of plastics that end up the mayflies eating. Oh, that made me feel very sad. So, you know, maybe we could burn all of our trash and get a second use of it, and obviously reduce our demands. Okay, let's see. I don't know
Craig.
what.
Craig
Yeah,
has
go
it.
ahead, Craig. Yes.
You haven't said much about nuclear, and I wonder what you see about the future there, especially some of the small modular reactors that are supposed to come online within a few years, and what you think of fusion if it ever happens.
Well, I'll take the second question first. I was invited to talk at the Princeton Tokamak Fusion facility, I don't know, about 7 years ago. And, you know, since I was the special speaker, they treated me well. So I got to have lunch with the director of the facility. And he was obviously a thoughtful, intelligent person. And, you know, I'd worked at Brookhaven and Oak Ridge nuclear facilities in the past. And I said, well, look, of course I'm going to repeat what they've been saying about fusion is that we'll have fusion in 30 years, and we always will. And what do you think about that? I said, and he said, well, you know, we're making some real progress, he says. I think we will build one working net energy producing tokamak. He said, but I don't think we'll produce two. He says they're too expensive. And anything that's expensive in terms of dollars is expensive in terms of energy. And we just had a so-called break-even fusion event. And what that meant is in an area about this big, they had more energy out than energy in because they achieved some fusion. But, I did a calculation of all the electricity to run the lasers that they had to do in the middle thing. And then I did an estimate based on the dollar cost of the tokamak, how much energy went into the whole facility. And the energy return on investment was like 10 to the minus 27 to 1. So I don't know. I'm not holding my breath. The smaller non-modular nuclear reactors, I'm pro-nuclear. I used to get my paycheck from the Atomic Energy Commission. I'm been very close to nuclear materials. No energy source is free. You kill about one person per 1,000 megawatt nuclear reactor a year, which is probably a Navajo uranium miner. And we kill no civilians in the United States from nuclear power. And we kill about 10 a year for the equivalent amount of coal production. So nuclear has actually saved a lot of lives. Not to mention, I've just read to my wife before we go to sleep, hundreds of letters he wrote from the Pacific, and he was in Okinawa and doing all of that, and 200 times was in charge of a anti-aircraft gun. So I support that actually the dropping of the atomic bomb, because A, it saved my father's life, and B, it saved the lives of millions of Japanese, I think. Now that's quite arguably. So I'm not anti-nuclear at all, but I'm scared about nuclear proliferation.
Yeah, regarding the small nuclear reactors, there's pluses and minuses. They're modular, so they're going to be much less expensive to build. We assume pretty much that you can't build a reactor that we have now. They can be placed close to the power grid where necessary, and they're much easier to maintain and less a chance to have accidents because they're all the same. But on the other hand, now you're going to have radioactive waste spread all over the country versus how it's now stored on site by the big reactors. You're going to have it all over the country. And until, so you got pluses and minuses.
Everything Anthony says is exactly right. And every energy supply is brought. But Anthony, here's the issue. We can't build them fast enough to make up for the decline of oil. And the question is, can we build solar facilities, PV or wind turbine facilities fast enough? Anthony, that was very good. Ann.
We had a Ollie community lecture, about 10 years ago with Charles Sinclair, who I guess had some background in the nuclear industry. And I think what he was proposing in these smaller reactors, like, your sort of your backyard heat pump kind of thing, was fission, but some technology.
Well, they're not heat pump size. They're 1 megawatt, which is pretty good size.
Well, I don't know.
But they're not 1,000 megawatt. We're building 2 reactors and turning them on in Georgia, which is the first reactors in a long, long time. And then they're talking about these smaller ones, but there's just been a new study concluding that they're not necessarily cleaner than the big ones.
Right.
But go ahead.
Well, just the concept, and I have no background to
Yeah.
this, but that the technology advance was the ability to burn the nuclear waste products in the process. So the concern about storage of nuclear waste was, which would have been like, why would I want one of these in my backyard, or for that matter, in Ashland, would have been solved. So I don't know whether that is the
No,
reason.
well, let me rephrase what you said. I think rephrase what you said, that you can walk away from one of these reactors and it wouldn't be a problem because the earth would absorb any heat. They're small enough so they don't produce enough heat so that the earth couldn't dissipate it. And that therefore, if they were well encased, then you wouldn't have your great grandkids who might be living with bows and arrows, who knows? And if they came across it, they wouldn't be hurt. That's what they're trying to do. And I don't know enough either, but I think that they are, in fact, in that respect, much safer. But the trouble is, if we're going to do this, we have to do it all around the world, and that means you have to spread nuclear technology, and that means all kinds of people in the world can make dirty bombs. I don't mean complicated fission device, boom. I mean just spreading. Plutonium especially is horribly toxic. So that's, look, those of you who have children and grandchildren, they're going to have to deal with these issues. And I was just having a big talk with my wife and my sister, both of whom are extremely educated, highly sophisticated thinking, and they're saying we have to make these very, very difficult decisions. And I would say, evolving away from oil, because the oil's not going to be there in, who knows, one generation, certainly. And we are electing all kinds of people that can't even finish high school.
Yeah.
And these require quite sophisticated. That doesn't mean we should ignore what they have to say at all. I'm not saying that at all, but you have to be able to think your way through these very complicated questions. And I told my sister, I think there's only 100 people in the United States who understand how fragile physically our democracy is. And they don't have a clue as to what to do. And so what are we going to do about that? And I said, I don't know. So, okay, Paul, do you have a question?
Well, I'm just kind of picking up on what you're saying. I do have children, and I worry about the world that they are going to be inhabiting going forward. I guess they're not despondent.
No, nor am I. Nor am I. I'm a happy person.
Yeah, but I think they will see also a lot of opportunities that come from the deindustrialization, and they won't necessarily see those as negative developments.
Well, that's what this guy, and I remembered his last name, Michael Dowd, Dowd. Did you look at his thing?
Oh yeah, I've looked at him. Yeah, he says doom but no gloom.
Right. And well, I think we're going to have to, my sister came here on an airplane. I don't know if your children will, or their children are going to go anywhere on an airplane, but you just get out in nature, make love, have a good meal, whatever. So
more local. We do have to take care of these larger looming problems about heating up the atmosphere and all, but
well, and maybe this I always thought the only way we're ever gonna stop this or the human juggernaut from consuming nature was when we ran out of oil. And you know, that's a bit complicated to talk about. So let's look here. We got another question here by Ann, and I sure would like to hear from some more of you. You alluded to immigration policy at one point. Yeah, I sure, you know, if I'm going to need a nurse, and she's going to come from the Philippines or Mexico, I'd sure like her to be here. If our local girls aren't, or guys are not going to do this for me, but that's tricky because I think there's X amount of oil left in the United States, and you have to divide it by Y number of people. And so it's tricky, and I don't have a clean answer for that. And I certainly think we ought to let workers in here on a green card to where we need workers and people who are willing to do the hard work that our young people seem less willing to do. That I don't have a good answer for that. The impact of A1, I cannot comprehend it. You know, I'm sure glad I don't have to correct papers and think about whether artificial intelligence, the machine somehow wrote the paper. You know, I've graded, I don't know how many thousands of papers as a career as a professor, but I said to my sister, who's a very high level legal person, I said, you know, why can't we require, like we require on our money, we require some seal that says this is official, something or another. Why can't we require any artificial intelligent product to have a seal on it that says this was generated by such and such an artificial intelligence algorithm? And and of course people will cheat, but the point is, if you cheat, you go to jail. And so if you're caught, you go to jail. And so this is the time that we should, I think, put that on anything made with AI. And Ann, I want to tell you, I'm wrong sometimes. I thought that robots would put industrial workers, people without college educations, but good workers, I thought it'll put them out of work, but our employment remains very strong, even if the employees sometimes are very frustrated. So I have no idea what artificial intelligence will do. I don't think it's good. I'm inherently extremely suspicious. I did an awful lot of computer programming. I know, you know, garbage in, garbage out and all that. I'm very familiar with that. But these artificial intelligence things can be pretty sophisticated. Maybe we can get them to get out this message.
Well, maybe we should at least let them take a stab at resolving the debt ceiling situation.
Yeah.
Well, I
What are
mean,
your views of the US healthcare system? Well, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think on that. And I'm influenced very much by my sister and her institute that she formed at Boston University is now the #1 legal healthcare institute in the United States. And she got a Kellogg Foundation grant and she traveled all around the world, South Africa and Canada and England and I don't know, Costa Rica and whatever, various places. And, you know, like Costa Rica has better health care than we do at something like 1/6 the money. And she says, we are so caught up. If we had universal health care, single payer health care, we could cut our health care costs in half. And the arguments against it are just stupid. And, you know, so what can I say? My wife is my sisters or I are hardly conservative, so maybe we don't represent that perspective well, but she said the arguments against single payer or national health care are just ridiculous.
Agreed.
And we could be so much more efficient. So now pacemakers for 90-year-olds with multiple organ compromises. I'm coming up to that pretty soon. So
Well,
I've been healthy all my life except for one time. Excuse me, Ann. Go
well, I was
ahead.
just going to say that, I spent the first part of my career on the breeding part of this, with involvement in contraception for like 20 some years. And now in this phase of life, I'm sort of in the encouraging realism about the ROI on aggressive treatment that is futile in nature and might, end up buying a very small amount of time for people at great cost, and not just cost, but also discomfort. So I don't know
My
how.
mother lived to 102, and the last 4 years were not worth it.
Yeah, I know.
But
So anyway, that's the other educational piece that I mean, it's kind of a marketing piece, just to educate and persuade people
well,
that,
whatever we do is done because people to some degree want it and somebody makes money at it. And then that balloons out of whatever. So, Paul,
Well, it seems to me whatever economics we pursue in the future has to have this efficiency aspect to it, where the incentives are all to improve the return on energy investment. Much
you're
more than,
arguing for efficiency.
sorry.
You're arguing for efficiency.
Yeah, and I know that was the mantra in the 1920s and whatnot, and I don't know if that we're talking about the same thing, reducing the manpower required to do things, or if we're talking about reducing carbon dioxide emissions, or we're talking about reducing the or getting more of the BTUs out of our energy production.
Well, be careful of Jevons paradox.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember, making steam engines more efficient to save coal
And
ended up using more coal because you made them cheaper.
yeah.
And that
So
you can see that
so
every
the-
day in modern life.
But I mean, that might be the place that economics is going, because we can't afford to have wasteful healthcare systems and just decide to leave 30% of the population outside.
Well, we made decisions in the 1980s and 1990s where we used to tax the rich proportionately more than the poor. And as I'm not an expert on this, but as I understand that that's been practically flipped as a percentage even.
Right.
And I think we have enough wealth for an awful long time if we distribute it more equitably. And somebody had asked this question before, and I don't think I'd answered it enough, but I have these graphs from Jessica Lambert, one of my former students, that show as energy use goes up there, the Human Development Index increases and then becomes asymptotic. In other words, if you're very poor, you need a certain amount of energy to greatly improve the quality of your life. And she showed this in great detail. But and she did it with energy return on investment also, same thing. But it would plateau. And all kinds of studies have shown that once you reach, let's just call it middle class, that getting richer, i.e., using more energy above that, has no influence on happiness. However, they do all those studies. There are many studies that show that. None that show you get happier and happier with more and more energy use. But people certainly seem to be driven to do that.
So if you had an economy that was really geared toward maximum happiness, or
Yeah, it
you know,
might not be a very energy intensive society.
yeah,
Now, if you decide that you will limit your energy, then is a good time to talk about efficiency, because you
Right.
wanted the most happiness or whatever, welfare, well, whatever you want to say, that per unit, as long as it doesn't result in Jevons paradox.
yeah.
So that's maybe I went and looked up some of Kate Rayworth's stuff because of your question here. And I mean, basically, she's saying that in a different way. She's saying you got to have sufficiency to meet human needs, but you don't need more than that. And the trouble is this whole competitive, I don't know, capitalist, but you can't blame it simply on capitalism, because communist or whatever other ists we have do the same thing. This whole concept of more. I can remember when Alfred Sloan was head of General Motors and Walter Reuther was the great labor guy. And Walter Reuther won a great deal from General Motors for the workers. And that's back when blue collar workers made real money working for General Motors and the like. And so there was this tremendous win for labor. In the next morning, Walter was back in Alfred Sloan's office. And Alfred Sloan said, Walter, what the hell are you doing here? You just got the biggest gain that labor has ever got. Why are you back in my office? What do you want? Walter looked him in the eye and he said, more, always more. Well, that's that's where we are. And Alfred Sloan always wanted more. Nelson Rockefeller always wanted more. And what's his name? Elon Musk always wants more. I think what you're doing is, I don't know, inadequate, dealing with your inadequacies in other departments. I don't know what you're doing. Yes, Ann. Turn on your speaker, Ann. Turn on your mic, yeah.
Since Ray's not here, I will advocate for his solution, which was, how do you get people to want less? And I will make a modest proposal. I guess it's not so modest, but I really do think if people believed in mortality, and we were at a point in time where people actually saw people die, and they realized they don't go out with anything other than what they've built up internally in their views of reality and life and philosophies, they might want less. But not if they're exposed to all the things that my industry has done, creating desires for things and advertising and things like that. Like, oh my gosh, I need an in-ground pool in my backyard, that kind of thing. So how do we get people to want less when the whole economy is based on consumption, it seems?
I think about it differently. I don't think we can retool humans because I think it's too deep in our genes for other reasons. I mean, going way back to hunter-gatherer days and so forth. I think what is going to happen is something like this, that as oil becomes less available, and I think it's inevitable, then, and it is happening in the United States, I look at it every week. As oil becomes less available, and people will perceive that mostly as inflation. And when they see inflation, they blame political leaders. And I think it will make, and this is what worries me in the short term, is it will make it more and more difficult to govern. And as things get more difficult to govern, I mean, that's the education we need. That these physical things are gonna be not entirely, but partly in control of the future. And we have to, that's what I think we have to educate for. And what I'm most afraid of is losing Jeffersonian democracy, which I believe in, and I think is a marvelous invention. And I read all the founding fathers in college, and I remain very impressed with that. And so that's my immediate concern. And my immediate concern is this is not understood at all in conventional economics. And how do we get the message out there?
Well, it seems like economics, at least as it's practiced today, has, these indexes or things that people look at, like GDP and unemployment and things like that. Do we need some other indexes that actually measure satisfaction or, I mean, it seems like we ought to be using those as the pole star. And
Well,
however,
that was what Jessica Lambert, I need to I'll put up on the site Jessica Lambert's
okay.
2014 paper, and I didn't talk about this very much, but I actually had this idea from reading Maslow. Anybody know who Maslow was? He's a very interesting guy. Ursula seems to know, and he had there's this pyramid of human what humans will do. They will first make sure that they're physically okay, and then enough food, and the going up to getting social recognition and whatever. This is called Maslow's hierarchy, and I did a hierarchy of what we need, and we need energy to get energy, and then we need energy to make food. I don't know which comes first, and then energy to, and then energy for education, and energy for healthcare, and energy for and then up at the top I had for opera, I mean for arts. Do we have enough surplus energy? And I estimated boldly that you needed something like 12-to-1 energy return on investment to be able to have what we perceive as modern civilization. And a lot of places in the world, you don't have that high in energy return on investment. And you can't have education, you can't have healthcare, you can't have sewage treatment. I've spent a lot of time in the developing world, and we saw all kinds of things we don't even think about that are sure nice, like sewage pipes. And turn on your.
Okay. I don't want to have background noise here. Anyway, I think the concept in the donut economics, whether it's practical or not, is that when you have sufficiency, Maslow's model is less of a pyramid, which kind of assumes that, it's a time thing, and you don't get to this self-actualization until you're like old and look back on your wonderful life. I think if you provide sufficiency very early on for people, that they understand that identity, meaning, and purpose, which is, your self-actualization, is really happening all through those steps. And so, informing things like, how do I or do I not need a 10,000 square foot house? That kind of thing. So I think it's I'm kind of back to advocating for a raised situation, which is, can't we educate without the economy as we know it collapsing?
I think that's an extraordinarily important question. I don't have an answer. We need to have Shakespeare in our lives.
We certainly need to have it for the Ashland economy.
Well, I think we've always had drama and, whatever. People have always wanted, but, even in agricultural societies where this energy surplus was very low, I think drama or storytelling or something was always important. I don't know quite how to answer that, but I do know that it's damn expensive to go to Shakespeare in Ashland. And
A lot less than it was, but quite frankly, we have 3 economic anchor stores in our little economic mall, and they are OSF, they are the university, and
yeah,
Ashland Community Hospital, and all 3 of them are facing some extraordinary challenges.
Yeah.
With
well, they're at the top of, boy, if I can find that immediately, that triangle we have of using from Maslow's idea, but having it in terms of energy return on investment. I should put, why in the hell didn't I put it on my, let me just see if it might be in one of the other ones I have out. Why we need, it might be here. No, it's not. No, it's not. Darn, okay, I don't know. I should be able to find it.
you're talking about Maslow's pyramid again? Yeah. So
Say something and say something for a while, and let me just look for a second. Keep
well,
people amused.
well, I'd like to hear from other people too. I think we all have our philosophies of life, and I mean, personally, it seems like when we are at this phase of life, we need to be concerned about our contributions, what energy are we bringing to this equation? And so, retirement is one of those things where you sort of feel like you're no longer in the economy as a producer, but rather as a cost to society.
Well, you're a consumer, sure.
Yeah, you have that benefit, but you're not a producer economically in some ways. But on the other hand, we have a tremendous pool of retirees who could be phenomenally contributing, and many do. Many do. I mean, I look at all these nonprofits and I don't know what they would do without retirees. But anyway, that's where I think you get satisfaction, but you also are contributing without any economic cost because you were doing it as a volunteer. So anyway.
Well, I get satisfaction out of teaching this course, I guess. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. But
Yeah.
I'm not getting satisfaction at the moment because I'm not finding the bloody pyramid I want.
Well, you can, let me look, you can find it online. I have
Yeah,
it,
but I want it right now.
I know, I have it in one of my talks on identity, meaning, and purpose in retirement.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Okay, somebody else ask a question, please. Ask me a difficult question. What the hell are we gonna do? Somebody asked me a difficult question about what we're gonna do. Come on. What's
what-
your solution? Or give me a
what-
solution. Give me a solution, Craig.
Love is the solution.
Oh,
No, not really.
well, it's one solution. Yeah, love your neighbor. Well,
Yeah.
how much do we waste? How much energy do we waste in conflict?
Oh,
Well, we can have all this discussion about what we should do in the future, but unless you have the political will to do it, it's not going to
Yeah.
happen. And, I think most of us kind of despair at the state of politics in this country.
I totally agree with that.
What could we say? I got it. Yay. Can you all see this?
No,
no.
All right,
Screen
I got to share my screen. Uh,
Well,
wait, it's my screen sharing is paused. What do I do?
You can stop it and then start a new, so stop.
Stop
yeah,
it.
Yeah, there we are.
Okay, now share screen. Here it is. Okay.
there we are.
Yeah, I don't know if the pictures of people block your view, but
No,
there. Okay, so just to extract energy, this is the energy return on investment that you need. And we calculated very carefully once that for transportation, you needed at least a 3-to-1. This is ERI increasing as you go up on the y-axis. And it's not a scientifically precise diagram, but we calculated how much, what the ERI you would need to support a family, grow food, support a family, education, healthcare, and arts. And you see it just to extract oil, but you can't do anything with it. If you have a ERI of 1.1 for 1, then you have to refine it and transport it. We figured out you needed at least 3-to-1 to grow food. You needed at least 5-to-1 and so forth. So, we get into all the time I'm in education. All 5 and 6+ years I spent in graduate school, I'm not producing anything for society. I'm just consuming, as I am, I suppose, being in retirement. So anyway, that was that idea. So I'm glad I could get that out. Okay, so I'm going to get out of my share screen now, stop share, and come back and look at people. And
Hey, Charlie, I'm going to have to step out. I got to get ready for my trip tomorrow. But
yeah.
let's make a. Can we get back together at about this time next week and talk about future plans?
the
Does
class is
anybody
over.
want to?
I think the
Well,
class is over. Yeah, maybe you two.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've done my thing. It's
Okay.
been, thank you for dealing with me and staying the course and all. And I think we will do more things. And Paul, I will talk with you anytime.
Okay.
About
Well,
and also I think a little bit. You think I should? Do people think when you get reviewed? Do you think we should teach this course again?
Yeah.
Ted does.
I'm not. I think the message is pretty straightforward and condensed and palatable.
And
I think so. I think it is a useful thing as well. I would say probably from a pragmatic standpoint, voters need to be educated. We are voters. But I think, as I mentioned in an email to you, and you're heading in that direction, is that younger people really need this education as well, just for making good decisions about how they're going to survive.
Yeah. Thank you for the thumbs up, Gail. I did notice that. And a few others, Diane, I saw a little smile and so forth. So I thank you all. I think I will, if everybody in the course got one person say you ought to take this course next fall or next winter, whenever I teach it. And Ann, you will be my connection with Ollie to do this. And I
Well,
don't
if
know, let's,
you need to do another course proposal.
yeah,
Ursula's,
well, I can do that,
yeah.
I
But
suppose.
if you want me to edit this particular one, which is a good
I would
summary,
love that.
so
I want to
just
get this to be in really good form so that we can just various people, that I've got somebody who wants to distribute it to all of the junior colleges or community colleges in the University of Maryland system. And I thought, wow, that'd be great. And somebody else who wants to distribute to high school students throughout the world, the developing world. I mean, they're the ones that are really going to get hammered by this.
I think
Um,
basically taking that first, I guess was probably more like 20 minutes or whatever, as the overview of the course would be useful to show them. Obviously, this is there's more depth, but that would be sort of like the trailer, so that, they're not going to sit through, whatever it is, 7 or whatever times 90 minutes, but that would be a good overview for people to look at and go, yeah, this is what I would like to include in my college class.
You mean take the beginning of today?
Yeah,
I hadn't thought of that way.
well, it's marketing, right?
Okay, well, you've given me some additional, it's not that I need it, but some additional meaning to life and to prepare this course. And so it's been interesting in trying to get my ideas into 8 lectures. And I think that was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
So,
stimulating.
hello, and if you see me on the streets and you see my white and black spotted dog, and stop and say hello.
Well, I think I think I said that in my email, take some Ollie courses. We've got a number of interesting
Well, my
minds.
wife does, and when she's taken something, I sit in with her. And oh my gosh, some of the ability of somebody to analyze Shakespeare was unbelievable.
Well, in your interest in this realm, I think did any of you, Ted, Christine, Diane, did any of you take Steve Jessup's Emergent Life in the Universe? I thought that was very provocative. Or
How many science courses are there? There are not many, right?
well, I would say there are usually maybe half dozen. Come to the Ollie Open House on July 28th from 1 to 4 in the SOU Stevenson Union, and you'll see the array of subject categories and talk to some instructors.
You remind me.
All right.
You remind me.
And come to the instructor reception, which is
Yeah, I will.
Friday. I'll see you there.
Yeah, well, you can always bug me.
Well, I'm always up for coffee. I think that's the best thing about Ollie is that you can just call people up and say, hey, you want to go have coffee? And quite frankly, very few people, even if they don't want to have coffee with you, can say no. Have you found that out? I mean, it's just like, oh, yes, someday that would be good. No, I actually get takers.
Well, Ann, why don't you go with my wife and I and you and whoever, if anyone, or just you or whoever,
Anybody, I'm up for coffee. Actually, I don't drink coffee. I drink tea. But
Not
anyway.
this week because she's going to visit her daughter.
All right.
Well, no, she's going to go visit her son. But
one of you bred, because
Huh?
that's said I'm glad one of you bred. You're obviously very intelligent people.
No, well, I just look at this in this alternation of generations, and my sister was a great liberal, bred a guy way over on the right, a fascinating young fellow, but he's not young anymore, but don't kids go in the opposite of their parents? I don't know.
Well, it's funny because I've always been a progressive, but I have to say that as you're talking about these shrinking resources, some of the concepts of the conservatives of local control may become necessary. I mean, growing your own food, not dealing with your own energy sources, doing your own local education and things like that, just because that's going to be necessary. But boy, I'll tell you, every time there's an election, it makes me wonder if humans have devolved in intelligence to the point that they can't govern.
I'll tell you something we looked at recently. We looked at something called chimp empire.
What's
You
that?
want to see, and if you have any hope for humans, just look at our nearest relatives in the wild. It is an amazing, amazing thing. And you think about those were probably pretty close to where we came from, these chimps.
Well, I
And
just remember those what primates, I'm not sure which ones, in Japan where they won't let some of the other chimps or whatever they are into the hot tub. They're sitting there freezing their butts off around the perimeter.
these Japanese monkeys that jump in the hot
Yeah,
water springs.
yeah.
Yeah,
The other guys are sitting there going like
yeah,
this, like there's plenty of room in there, fellas, but no.
yeah. Well, I tell you, you look at this chimp empire, and it's not going to give you a whole lot of hope for humanity because these guys look so much like us, and they go to war and they go through all complicated social permutations, and they have love, and they form what they are devious. They form alliances, and so this guy is number one chimp and number three chimp and number seven chimp do all kinds of devious things to get in, because number one chimp gets the most, pardon me, tail. And, on and on from there. It is an amazing thing to watch. Diane, where do you live?
I live in Talent.
Talent, okay.
And
Where do you live, Ted?
I live in Medford.
Medford. Oh, okay. So you're
Christine?
not quite in Ashland, but
Well,
maybe you've
we do have sort of, I would say, a Ashland-centric view of, I would say, an Ashland-centric view of Ollie. And, I chair the Livable Ashland Alliance, so I am very concerned about things in Ashland, but you cannot see, and Diane, you'll agree with this, you cannot see the effects of the Almeida fire without realizing that our towns don't have borders. And we need to have more of a regional perspective, and
and we're fragile.
very fragile.
Humans think that this is the way things are
And will be.
and will be. But Nate, you certainly learned that as an ecologist, is that the ecosystems get kicked around left and right and this way and that way all the time.
Well, actually, besides the fire, the other thing that you would think would be an incredible lesson to people was or is the pandemic. And when you see, this is what I mean about realizing mortality, when very early on, people of all ages, races, incomes, and so forth, realize that anything can happen anytime to anyone, that, I would think that they would end up with more of a species perspective, but instead it was divisive. And that is the thing that is so makes me very pessimistic about humans.
You will not be encouraged watching Chimp Empire.
Well, the Earth is a self-correcting mechanism, and
I don't know, those meteors coming in, that has really changed our view. So you see, the origin of geology was uniformitism, it was called, back in Hutton's time and back in England. And he said, what you see now is always been going on. And then it's only in the last 30 or 40 years that this catastrophic view of gigantic meteors or gigantic volcano. I mean, we could have a volcano tomorrow that would cool the earth by 10 degrees. Boom.
Yeah, I would say that Yellowstone.
Yeah. When the Yellowstone went, yes, indeed. Or all that lava in eastern Washington. What's that
Yeah.
like? Oh, well, or even you go up, you just drive up north of here an hour or less, and you look at all of those columnar chunks of volcanic ejecta that came out of apparently McIntyre, Mount, our local volcano,
The Claflin, yeah. Well,
McLaughlin. Well,
so
yeah.
also, because you're new to our geology, you might want to take Karen Grove's class on, see, like a geologist, all the geology of the Rogue Valley, which is pretty fascinating. And Diane, did you take that? I think
I'm still taking it. She's wonderful. We had
Yeah,
a field trip on Saturday. Sunday,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. You don't look at the place quite the same after that course.
Exactly. We're very unusual here. So
I
Yeah.
love taking geology in upstate New York because it was all outside. We'd go on a field trip every weekend, and I mean every weekend we'd go out and look at all the glacial stuff, especially and the sedimentary rocks and whatever. But
Well,
I took geology before we knew about plate tectonics.
Well, that's the thing about Karen's course that's really interesting, because we are a very geologically fascinating area. We have all these terrains, which are plate-bounded faults, or fault-bounded plates. I guess it's the other way around. Anyway, so they're all moving, in this like three-dimensional way, which, how that will all play out. It's kind of fun. Didn't you find the what do you call it, simulations of how the plates are going to move, Diane? Where she's showing like Nevada getting big, and some of those other things that are going on. I think,
sorry, Craig. Oh, Ted, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, she mentioned that the world was round. I'm still thinking about that.
Well, I've been interested in plate tectonics since whatever year did they start talking about it, Charlie? What year was that?
About 1980, I think.
That was a little earlier than that, but I lived in California, so I was always kind of keyed into that. So
Did you ever read? I read John McPhee's article in the New Yorker. I'm kind of often a New Yorker type scientist, and I read John McPhee's article about how California was formed. All these different chunks of stuff crashed in, and that was really
like
interesting.
A conveyor belt is how
Yeah.
came, that's where the Cascadia subduction zone thing is interesting from Karen's class.
Mhm.
But honestly, I think when I get discouraged by humans, I do find solace in plate tectonics and mitochondria and things like that are just bigger than we are. And keep hoping that.
Well, I've just read 100, more than that, letters from my father in World War II. He's out in the Pacific. He got splashed by a kamikaze, And he was a Christian and a very, very gentle person. And yet he's out there in charge of a 20 millimeter gun shooting at Japanese people all the time. Yeah, he's a lieutenant out in on a surveying ship in Guam and Okinawa and Marianas and stuff, and getting ready to invade. I'm just reading now. I just gave my sister a big, basically all my father's letters to my mother, which I had read every night. My wife, not every night, but often, and put her right. She'd be really, really fascinated, and then she'd be dead asleep. But it was a nice thing for us to share. And she said, I never cared about World War II till I heard it from your father directly. And all the things he couldn't say where he was or exactly what he was doing. He'd talk about fireworks when there was a lot of military activity. And he was actually, he said, I was much more likely to have been killed by a typhoon than by a Japanese person. And but so he was I'm not sure how I got on that, but that was very, very interesting to me.
So Ted,
And I just imagine my father writing this in 1944 or 1945. If he had any idea that in 2023 I'd be reading this. I mentioned in there all the time, he's very concerned about how's 2-year-old Charles doing, and Francis, my sister, who was just here, and how that would have blown his mind. And so when I sent it to my sister's son to give to his children someday, if they're ever interested, I said, you got to tie it with string instead of rubber bands, because the rubber bands didn't make it for the 80 years between when he wrote it, or 78 years between when he wrote it and when they got rid of it for the second time. And how that would have blown his mind when he's out in the Pacific getting shot at and whatever. Son would read those, the 2-year-old Charles would be reading that on his 80th birthday.
well, so Ted, are you of an age where military service might have been a requirement, like the Vietnam War?
I was
just thinking.
I was damn lucky, and I'm embarrassed by it.
Well, I'm thinking of Ted because, you're a little bit younger, I think. Are you, Ted?
Not by much.
Oh, okay. Well, I just think how distressing it would be to me to think about being ripped out of my home and required to go and fight in some conflict that isn't even relevant to me. And then you think about all the social disruptions that were created by World War II, people who maybe had never left their little burg, never maybe seen a person of a different race, being shipped all over the world and being exposed to all these different, different realities.
Somebody trying to kill you.
Yeah, somebody trying to kill you. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's.
Well, I was of that era. I did have a draft number.
Yeah.
A fairly low draft number. I was excused from service for a while because of educational deferments. But
yeah, me too, Ted. That's what I was going to say. But then I found out that the educational deferments were put into place because senators didn't want their sons, who were often in graduate school, to be drafted. And so that's why I'm a little bit embarrassed. But, I'm certainly glad. My best friend has a Silver Star and was a lieutenant in Vietnam. And one of our friends was killed in Vietnam in a horrible way. And my friend Billy is incensed that young people, including him, were sent to do this where we had no business being. And when I list our worst recent presidents, I don't pick the obvious one. I think George W., who invaded a country that was innocent and disrupted the continent, the whole region since in the Iraqi invasion, I think to have started a war against another, in the sense of our country, innocent to us. I think that's just a horrible, horrible thing. And, you know, I'm conflicted in many ways about Ukraine, of course. Although I guess I think that we have to do what we're doing.
Well, you know, speaking of oil, I do think that cynically, that war that you're referencing was definitely about securing oil for America. So, you know, I don't know, we've been the beneficiaries of continued access to it. So it's one of those
Yeah.
things, you start feeling a bit complicit
It
in,
all started with Winston Churchill, who in 1911 changed the fuel for British warships from coal to oil.
mm,
And that got us into the Middle East, got Britain and France into the Middle East, and went on from there.
well, we're not going to solve the world's problems, but I probably ought to go eat lunch.
Yeah, at least we can go eat lunch. Well, Ann, I'll try to. My
Yes,
wife
sir.
says we should go out and have coffee once a week.
Yeah.
So, you have any preferred place?
Boy, I'll tell you, you know, there are so many, and I think it's kind of fun to go around. And
Yeah,
Diane, now that did you and Tyson always live in Talent, or is that new for you?
We were in Ashland for 10 years.
That's what I thought. But anyway, I am so enjoying the Gather.
the
Have you
what?
been there? Gather. It's a
Little restaurant in
it's a
town.
restaurant that was in where a coffee place was in Talent. And anyway, now it's a restaurant. But anyway, I will go anywhere. So
Well,
anyway,
any of you want to join us, or, we could
yeah.
just send out something to everybody. And
We can have a salon.
Yeah.
Christine,
I wanted to point out one thing. I thought my military service did some minor good because I ended up in an Army Reserve unit, and they looked at my background, which was an engineering degree, an MBA, and a law degree, and they said, "Perfect, you'll be an oral surgeon's assistant." And so I spent 6 years fighting cavities and improving people's oral health.
I had braces. Maybe I could thank you all for that.
I had braces too.
Yeah, mine. I think they forgot to tell people that they should wear their retainers, like probably for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So a lot of my work didn't last. But anyway, is Christine? Are you still there? I'm looking at your name. Hello. She's off video and she's off audio. But anyway, I think it's Christine Sears. Anyway, maybe she just didn't turn off her Zoom. But anyway, I've enjoyed talking to you guys. And yeah. And Ted, like I say, I've seen you in other classes. Were you in the Stromberg's class on the work of the city of Ashland? I can't remember if that's the one I saw you in.
I was in the class on industry in the Rogue Valley.
Yeah, that was fun I'll
Very
tell you.
interesting.
Well, I don't think what instructors realize, and it's like, if I'm curious about something, I'll just go out and get somebody to teach on it, and or invite people who do know things. I would love to get somebody from mycorrhizal applications to talk about fungi, but they turned me down for the manufacturers of the Rogue Valley class, and I couldn't get them to teach a whole class on mycology. But that's fascinating. Because quite frankly, if you read anything in that realm, Paul Stamets, fungi will save the world. cleaning up nuclear waste and oil spills and plastic and agricultural things. And anyway,
But they may save it for themselves.
huh? Yeah,
But
well,
they'll just save it for,
yeah,
yeah.
though it's food. Yeah. Anyway,
Well, my
so
wife, we used to spend summers at the Flathead Lake Biological Station. That's where we met in Montana. And a guy named Orson Miller used to come out there and teach these fungi courses, which were just unbelievable.
yeah.
And you want a mycorrhizal or a fungus? They're a little bit different.
Well,
What am I?
mycorrhizal are the tendrils, right? And then you've got the fruiting. You have the fruiting body of a
Yeah.
fungus. But well, I got kind of interested in that because it's just like, again,
Well,
when
all
you,
I'm saying is if you can find somebody to teach it, I bet my wife would take it. That's all.
yeah, why not? I still do. I will still do a little
We're
arm twist.
still recording, so I better
Oh
stop
God.
recording. Bye. You can say goodbye to everybody. Good Lord, you're gonna edit
Well,
everything, right, Ann?
Well,
Good.
if you send me, well, you're going to send everybody the recording, but I will certainly, before you post it, I will edit out all of our discourse here because it's been fun, but not necessarily anybody else interested in it but us. So anyway,
Okay.
send me the link and then
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody. See you.
Okay,
bye.
bye.
Might see you over coffee. Who knows?
Sounds good.